Well, good afternoon to everyone. It's indeed an honor to be able to share some of my minuscule knowledge. And before I come to the actual topic of plant nomenclature, I just want to address the young students who are in their BSc today. For example, if I use names such as Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, Ajinkya Rahana, Rishabh Pant, etc., all of you will know I'm talking about cricketers. Yes or no? I think it's yes. Similarly, if I talk about Amitabh Bachchan, Shah Rukh Khan, Ranbir Kapoor, Ranveer Singh, Deepika Padukone, Priyanka Chopra, Kajol, Madhuri Dixit, etc., you all know I'm talking about film industry individuals. You know them because you either keep watching cricket or you enjoy movies, etc., and you want to know more about them. In some ways, we say that Indians are mad about cricket and Bollywood. Well, it's good because you like to learn what's happening in the world of cricket and what happened in the world of films. Now, if I address these small young students again with names such as Schizesium aromaticum, Cinnamomum verum, Phenicum vulgare, Trachispermum ami, Curcuma longa, Cicer aritinum, Vigna radiata, Phaseolus vulgaris, etc. Many of them will be thinking, what is this gentleman telling us about? Well, these are things in your everyday life, in your kitchen. And if you know these, you have make a good beginning in knowing taxonomy. All the items which are used in your kitchen are basically, or for a very large majority, plant-based. Therefore, if you have to learn about botany, start in your own home, in your kitchen. And once you get into the groove of knowing the names of plants which you're eating, you will enjoy what you eat. Today morning's Times of India attracted my attention. A young boy, 16-year-old Aman Sharma, is a wildlife conservationist whose photographs have been put up in the National Geographic and in the CNN. He was a runner-up in the Smithsonian Institution Wildlife Photograph of the Year in 2020. Just how did he start? He found a bulbul nest in his balcony. And he got enamored by nature. Now he's world renowned, which means that if you put a little effort in what you want to learn or what you want to achieve, then it goes a long way in helping you to know nature. And when we do that, then we start understanding why we need nomenclature and why it's important. Therefore, thank you for this opportunity to share my ideas, and share my thoughts. One more point before I start the presentation. I was named Prithi Pal by my parents when I was about less than a year old. If you look at the origin of this name, Prithvi ka palan karne wala. So maybe my name linked me to my subject. When I was about 5 years old, my parents visited Lucknow and dug up old ancient family history from the Brigu Simbathas. In that, my father told me that it was mentioned that your son Prithipal will be a Vaidya. So I'm linked to plants there also. I do not know how that information went to that Brigu Samhita. Nobody knows in the family how that information went there. But, well, that is what is the importance of names. That is what nomenclature is all about. If we understand the significance of the name, we will be much more enlightened by what we are doing. One more point before I conclude my introduction. I named my son Chiranjeev. Why? He was born premature, and within 48 hours, he had acute jaundice, which required blood exchange transfusion. I donated blood, and he was infused blood by draining out the hyperbilirubin blood, giving him a new life. So the name Chiranjeev has helped him to grow and enjoy life even now. This is a blessing of God. Therefore, nomenclature, the science of plants, helps us to understand the significance of this. I have picked up a theme to talk about formation of names and their importance, and then list different plants, show you plants which most of them which I have seen and collected, telling you the importance of their names, and then concluding with hardcore basic information on what is nomenclature. Because if I run through the hardcore information first, you might find it difficult to sit through the lecture. Therefore, I've made it easier in the beginning to build up a story which should help us to know how this science works in everyday life. Yes, please, the next slide. Rajni? Yes. We all know we have names. Therefore, if you look at history, man has been providing names to people since ancient times. In addition, man has used names for objects, plants, animals, and many more aspects of nature as well as life. Every language has different features for formulating names. Next. Therefore, what is a name? A name is a tool which serves as a reference. A name helps in knowing about the features or characters of the named individual, object, or organization. Next. What is the purpose of a name? A name is a means of communication. When I say Prithipal Singh is speaking, I'm communicating to you all that who am I who's talking to you. The name is the key to information. My name has been used to tell you what all were my achievements. Name serves as a reference point. If you know the name of a plant, or if you know the name of an individual, or if you know the name of an organization, today you have the facility of Google search. You just put that name and you get information. Therefore, name is helping you to retrieve information. And this is a very important aspect of knowing the significance of names, the purpose of names. This is what the basis of nomenclature is all about. Next one, please. I must mention here that there are rules or regulations for formulating names. Thus, human names are based on religious group or community in which the person is born. For example, Christian names are different from Muslim names or Hindu names. Further, every community has defined ways of naming a child. For example, in the Sindhi community, the naming of the child is done on the 6th day after birth. This is called the Chatti ceremony. And you have jokes, Chatti ka doodh yaad dilwa dunga, in many films. This is the time when the priest performs rituals and pronounces a letter for naming the child, so that the parents can choose the name for their child with that akshar, that letter. Next one, please. In the same manner, plant names also follow rules and regulations. The International Community of Plant Taxonomists requires all botanists to follow the rules. These are laid out in the International Code of Nomenclature for algae, fungi, and plants, earlier called International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, now abbreviated as ICN. One very important requirement of this code is that all names of plants must be Latin in form, written in the Latin alphabet, and subject to rules of Latin grammar. They can be derived from any language, but they must follow the rules laid down in the ICN. Next one, please. How are names formed? Names can be formulated in many ways. First, let us find out how human names are formed. Next. Humans have been named after divine entities. We have names such as Rama, Krishna, or even Ramakrishna, Vishnu, Shiv, Indrajit, or Dr. Indrajit Chopé. We also come across individuals whose names provide information on their ancestral place. Almost all names of people in South India have the name of their ancestral village or place, and names of Kashmiri Pandits also mention the location of their ancestors. We know of Professor H.Y. Mohan Ram. H stands for Hole Narsapur, the village to which his ancestors belong. Y is for Yoga Narshiman, the name of his father. We know of Professor N.S. Rangaswamy. N stands for Najangud, the village of his ancestors. S is Shrikantaya, the name of his father. Professor K.R. Shivanna. K is Kudranahalli, the village. R is Ramalingaya, the father. And I may add over here, many of us know about former Prime Minister H.D. Deve Gowda. H stands for Hardanahalli, another village near to Kudranahalli. Therefore, when you look at these names, you get an indication of their ancestors, where they came from. Similarly, it's a pleasure to talk about Professor Sudhir Kumar Sapori. Sapori comes from the place Sapor in Kashmir. He was my contemporary during PhD at the University of Delhi. And although I started teaching in 1971 in the university, he did not take up teaching assignments in the university at all of Delhi. After his PhD, he moved to JNU. And he was also the warden of the hostel in JNU. From JNU, he moved to ICGEB and later returned to JNU as Vice Chancellor. He retired from JNU as Vice Chancellor. It's a pleasure to mention an old colleague and friend. Next one, please. Yes, a photograph of Professor H.Y. Mohan Ram. Unfortunately, we lost him a little more than 2 years ago. Next one, please. Professor K.R. Shivanna, he settled in Bangalore, very well linked to many NGOs and still very active in his work with many organizations. Next one, please. Yes, this is Sudhir Kumar Sapori, retired Vice Chancellor of JNU. Next one, please. Yes. Humans can also be named after the profession. We know of many Parsi names. For example, Nani Palkiwala, a famous attorney who would openly say he's Palkiwala because his ancestors made palkis and they became famous for their palkis. Therefore, they're Palkiwalas. I know of a botanist, Aban Daruwala, from St. Xavier's College, Bombay. Her ancestors were in the liquor trade. In Delhi University, we had Professor Bandari. Bandhar is a store. Bandari is a storekeeper. The profession which a family adopts can give a name to that family. Names can also refer to knowledge of scriptures. We know that the Vedi should know 2 Vedas. A Trivedi should know 3 Vedas. A Chaturvedi should know 4 Vedas. Similarly, group names such as Sharma, Tiwari, Bharadwaj refer to Hindu Brahmins, while Agarwals, Bansals, Mittals, Goyals, Guptas indicate that they belong to the Vaishya community. This is the importance of nomenclature. This is the significance which helps us to understand communities. Next one, please. Names have also been based on the belief of the parents about their child. The name Panchanan was based on the belief that the person would have knowledge of 5 heads. Just as Ravana, the king of Lanka, was called a Dashanan, having knowledge of 10 heads. We know a girl can be named Sukanya on the belief that she is a good girl. Su means good and Kanya is a girl. Or a boy is named Kulbhushan on the belief that he will be the jewel of the family. Kulbhushan. The boy may be also named Chirag, believing that he will show he will be lamp to show light to the family. Next one, please. Yes, this is Professor Panchanan Maheshwari. He really deserved this name. Professor Panchanan Maheshwari was a scholar not only in just his basic subject of plant embryology, but a scholar in many subjects within biological sciences. It is to his credit that he has supervised PhD thesis in taxonomy, in microbiology, in genetics, in morphology, in angiosperm embryology, in gymnosperm embryology, in even mycology. Therefore, he really deserved the name Panchanan. He could put so much knowledge in his head. And his son, Professor Satish Maheshwari, would say, well, the parents named him Panchanan because he had a big head. Well, that could accommodate so much knowledge. Therefore, the name has been related to the achievements he has made. Next one, please. We can call a girl with beautiful eyes as Sunayana or Nayantara or even Meenakshi, because Meenakshi means fish eye, which is very beautiful. We come across names related to significant events or specific dates in the calendar. For example, Purnima or Poonam is one who is born on full moon day, Purnmashi. Or Basanti Devi or Basant Singh in Punjab, born on Basant Panchami. So you can relate to an event by just knowing the name. Next one, please. Therefore, human names can be grouped into three broad categories. Names based on religion or divine entities, names related to particular region or area, names based on features, characters, events. Next one, please. Interestingly, plant names can also be named in the same way as humans. We can discuss plant names in three categories. Number one, plants named on religious beliefs or in honor of individuals, plants named after geographical locations, plants named on the basis of their features or characters, or a combination of two features. These can be further grouped into many smaller units using different aspects. Next one, please. We start with plants named on religious beliefs or in honor of botanists. Next one. Yes. Piptocephalus bridgemohani is the name of fungus of the Zygomycetes, order Mucorales, to which your Rhizopus belongs. It is named in honor of a botany professor of the Delhi University, Professor Brijmohan Johari. The specific epithet Brijmohani is from Brijmohan. So the name has come from an individual's name. A fossil seed was named after Professor Maheshwari as Maheshwari Ella. Then I had the honor to know and meet and interact with a renowned botanist in Northeast India, Dr. A.S. Rao, an explorer and served as regional botanist for many years in Shillong. He and his team collected a rare palm, which they took almost 4 years to identify as a new species. And the team said, sir, let us honor you by giving your name to this new genus, Asroa. The name is after A.S. Rao, and Triandra, three anthers in the flower. So you get a new name, Asroa triandra, named after two characters, the name of the scientist who collected the plant and the name of one feature of the flower in that plant. Then we have very common knowledge of a plant called Putranjiva roxburghi, growing in almost all campuses everywhere in Delhi. This is called the child life tree. It belongs to the family Euphorbiaceae. The generic name Putranjiva is from Sanskrit, referring to an ancient belief that the plant's strong stone-like seeds ward off evil because they have several medicinal properties. Therefore, the seeds of this plant were strung into necklaces and put around little children so that they will not be harmed by any evil. They will have good life. Putran Jiva. The specific epithet Roxburghii is in honor of William Roxburgh, a Scottish surgeon and botanist who worked extensively in India. Therefore, just these four examples have been cited to bring out one important aspect of nomenclature. Next one, please. Musa paradisiaca, a plant with which we are all familiar, and every one of you knows about this plant in some way or the other. This is the cultivated banana or the fruit of paradise. Generic name Musa in Islam or Moses in Christianity or Judaism refers to the prophet. Therefore, this is prophet's plant, and prophets are living in paradise. Therefore, this is a plant which gives fruits for those living in paradise. That's why it's called Musa paradisiaca. Next one, please. Yes, everybody loves chocolates. They come from the fruits of this Theobroma cacao. I have had beautiful visits of collecting this plant in botanical gardens and agricultural institutes, and it's a wonderful sight to see these fruits growing on the stem directly. This phenomenon is called cauliflowery, and you can pluck them with your hand because they're low down, not high up. Theobroma is called food of the gods. Why? Because the name Theos in the Mexican language is for the deity of the god, and Broma is god, Theo is god, and the food is for the god. Therefore, Theobroma cacao is the botanical name for this plant. It is regularly used in many forms, and in the tribal communities in South America, etc., there is a ritual that only men can consume products of Theobroma because it's intoxicating. Therefore, please be careful. Don't let too much chocolates intoxicate you. Next one, please. Yes, I just mentioned a few things about Putranjiva roxburghii. This is the plant, and the hard seeds are what gives that concept of warding off evil and giving life to the child. Next one, please. Plants named after geographical regions. Many plants have been named after the place from where they were first collected and identified by different botanists. I start with an Indian plant. Yes, next one, please. Mangifera indica, the mango plant from India. The name Mangifera is from Tamil in Indian language, South Indian language. In Tamil Nadu, Tamil is spoken widely. I also speak some Tamil. In Tamil, the term mangai means mango. Therefore, the Latin name Mangaifera means mango-bearing plant. Since the plant is a native of Indian subcontinent, the specific epithet indica is used. Therefore, world over, everybody knows Mangifera indica because the name is significantly well known throughout the world. Similarly, we have the common tea plant, Camellia sinensis or Thea sinensis. This is a plant from China. The generic name Thea is based on the Greek goddess Thea. Therefore, again, there is a link to gods and goddesses. And sinensis comes from China. Secondly, if we look at the importance of this plant, there are many factors which have been linked to the significance of drinking tea, and it has become a very good industry everywhere. There is a famous American incident called the Boston Tea Party, which was revolutionary in many ways. Therefore, tea has many links with society and civilization. Next one, please. Yes, everybody has seen mango plants growing everywhere. There are mango fruits which are even blue in color. The variety of mangoes in India is mind-boggling. There is a Kalimullah farmer near Lucknow who has a plant on which he has grafted more than 70 different varieties of mangoes on a single plant. Each branch is one different variety. You can imagine how much effort that man has put into creating new varieties of mango for the world over. And recently, Chetan Bhagat, in one of his articles, said that the world knows only about Alfonso mango from Maharashtra, but there are hundreds of other varieties which we have not promoted. Therefore, if we as students of botany know our mango plant and help the farmer, help industry to get a brand name for India with mangoes, we will achieve something. Next one, please. The tea plant, I have to use a photograph, although I have collected tea plant with flowers myself several times. Therefore, but at the moment, I don't have my own specimen, so I have share a photograph from a book. Next one, please. Yes. A very interesting story about the double coconut, which is in the news for many reasons. This is also called the sea coconut, or in French, coco de mer, botanically, Lodoicea malvavica. This is a monotypic genus. That means only genus with one species of the family Araceae. It is endemic to certain islands, Praslin and Cruciaceae in Seychelles. The generic name is in honor of King Louis XV of France. Louis in Latin is Lodoicis. Therefore, Lodoicea comes from Louis. For many centuries, the fruits of this plant fell down from the trees. You will be surprised to know a single fruit can weigh 25 kilograms, and they would germinate after they fell down, maybe taking 4 years, 5 years, even 6 years to germinate. When they germinated, they became light and they were able to float away in the oceans. Therefore, many such double coconut plant fruits and plants were found in Maldives. It was thought that this plant originated Maldives. It was called Lodoicea malvavica, commonly the Maldive coconut. However, a French ethnobotanist and plant explorer, Rachel Dufresne, discovered that the original home of double coconut is not in Maldives, but it is in Seychelles. At that point of time, Seychelles was totally uninhabited. Nobody was living in those islands. Therefore, nobody knew of what those islands were. When this ethnobotanist and explorer reached that island, he was surprised to see the very large number of plants growing there. Therefore, he said that this is a native of Seychelles and not of Maldives. Later on, botanists suggested that we should change the name to recognize the original or native place of this interesting plants. It was named to Lodoicea seychellarum. However, this was overturned following the rules of nomenclature, and the original name, Lodoicea malvavica, is now used as the correct name of double coconut. You can see the picture on the next slide, please. Yes. Now, why I said this is in current news, we have one single tree of this plant in the Indian Botanical Garden in Howrah, Calcutta. And I have seen that tree when I visited the garden in the early 1970s. It was never fruiting. Why? Because it was a female plant and there was no male plant near it for pollination. Attempts were made to get pollen from male plants from other countries and pollinate it. First, the nearest neighbor was Sri Lanka. They brought plants with the male flowers from Sri Lanka, pollinated the flowers in Calcutta, and waited for fertilization to take place and fruit formation to happen. A few aborted attempts did not succeed. Therefore, they moved from Sri Lanka to Thailand and brought male flowers from Thailand to pollinate the female flowers of this plant, and they achieved success. I think now they have about 6 such fruits which they have harvested, and they are keeping under security, letting them mature, because it may take 5 to 6 years to mature. They don't want these fruits to be robbed, hijacked, or stolen, or even destroyed. And they want to ensure that these seeds grow into new plants and they can be planted in different parts of the country. Only a few specialist botanists working in the Botanic Survey of India know where these 6 plants are located, and they are taking great care of them. We all pray that they succeed in their efforts to raise new plants from seeds harvested in India. Next one, please. Yes. Coming to more common plants. As a bachelor in 1970, I collected this plant from Yamuna banks in Wazirabad, brought it to my lab, made efforts to identify it. There was no such plant listed in Flora of Delhi. Looked up Flora of Upper Gangetic Plains, did not find this name. Looked up, because we didn't have Google or other things to search at that time, looked up some literature in the library, and suddenly somebody said, why don't you look up Flora of Australia? So there are 6 volumes of Flora of Australia. I picked up the volume containing the family Astralaceae, and looking at the characters of the plant I had collected, dissecting out characteristic features, and comparing with the description given for composite plants, Astralaceae plants in Flora of Australia, I focused on this Cotula australis. Why? Because it was commonly growing in many parts of Delhi, and it was known from some other parts of India, but not published as a new record for Delhi. Therefore, we got it verified as Cotula australis, and the paper was published as a new record for Delhi. So when you go out into the field and look at nature, you come across things which are not listed in your vocabulary. You have to find out what is. This reminds me of a famous botanist, E.J.H. Horner. He had the distinction of collecting only new species of plants. Wherever he went for excursion, he would lay his hands on a plant species which had never been described in science earlier. That was his ingenuity. By looking at nature, and if he saw plants which he think he could identify easily, he never bothered about collecting them. But when he saw plants which he could not know what it would be, he collected it and identified it. That is what nomenclature is all about. If you look at knowing about the wonders of nature. Next one, please. Yes. We all love eating cashew nuts. This is the full fruit. The red portion is called the cashew apple. It is the swollen thalamus. It is the black nut hanging below the thalamus, and that is the cashew nut. The red part, the thalamus, is used for making feni in Goa. It is a very interesting drink. If anybody wants to enjoy it, be careful, please. Now, why is it called Anacardium occidentale? Interesting, very interesting. We use the name Anacardium occidentale because occidentale refers to the Occident, that is Central America, Northern and South parts of Southern America, whereas the Orient is East and Southeast Asia. This plant is from the Occident, from South America. Therefore, it is called Anacardium occidentale. It has spread widely and it's growing beautifully in India, in the Western Ghats. There are beautiful plants of this tree even in Bangalore. There are several trees in a church compound, a church built more than 180 years old, has a beautiful compound with cashew trees growing there. And people walking down the road see these cashew fruits and get charmed by the color. They try to collect them. The local inhabitants of that compound don't allow harming any of these plants. Therefore, the name occidentale is from the region from which the plant originated. We have the opposite of this. Next slide, please. Tremma orientalis, the Indian charcoal tree of the family Cannabaceae. Orient is from East Asia, this part of the country. Therefore, you will be able to correlate many aspects of the names from the regions which they come from. The next one, please. Yes. I have collected this plant many times during my excursions to Shimla, Nainital, etc. Yongia japonica or Cryptus japonica, family Asteraceae, native of China and Japan, widely spread as a weed in many parts of the world. I saw it even in America. Therefore, the only thing which links it to its original home is its specific epithet, japonica. And that is the beauty of nomenclature. Wherever you collect it, you're reminded of its origin. Next one, please. Ficus bengalensis, the banyan tree from Bengal, family Moraceae. Now, why is it called the banyan tree? In the ancient past, especially if you go towards British era, Britishers saw that many banyas would sit under the tree and trade in commodities. Therefore, if the banyas can sit on the tree must be the banyan tree. That's how the name banyan tree came into being in the English language. It is originally from Bengal. That's why it's called Ficus bengalensis. There is a beautiful specimen, almost 300 years old, in Indian Botanic Garden in Howrah. Yes, its original trunk is dead, but the tree is surviving. There are many better examples in parts of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and even Punjab. I have seen beautiful specimens of this wide-spreading trees with a beautiful canopy in many parts of the country. Therefore, wherever you see it, you're reminded of Bengal, and that is the beauty of nomenclature. There is a variant which I'll talk about a little later about this plant's variant. Next one, please. Yes. In my BSc days, I was enamored by this plant when we went to the Western Ghats. We saw the red fruits and dark green leaves. When we collected the fruits, our hands were covered with powder, red powder. I learned from my teacher, Father Saldana, at that time. This is called the Kamala dye plant, the Kamala dye tree. It's a member of the family Euphorbiaceae. I have seen this in Punjab during my many visits during my survey work in the 2000s, early 2000. And it's a beautiful tree. The next slide shows the fruit, which is the source of the Kamala dye. And I'll talk about the plant's name just now. Yes. It's originally from Philippines. Therefore, wherever it grows, it reminds you of its origin. Philippinensis is the Latin form of the name Philippines. Next slide, please. Yes. The fruits are typical tricoccus, like most of Euphorbiaceae fruits, even Euphorbia is like this. And the three styles can be seen. the fruit surface is coated densely with small pouches containing pigments. And the moment you touch those pouches break and the pigment spreads out. The pigment is used in the food industry as well as in the dyeing industry. Yeah, sorry, not in the food industry, in the cosmetic industry. You can use it in many forms to give color to your cheeks and enhance your beauty. Next one, please. Yes, a very interesting plant from India, Imli, Tamarindus indica. When the Persians came to India in the Middle Ages, they were shocked, surprised to see date-like fruits hanging from trees which are different from the date fruit trees. They called it Tamare Hind, the date of India, Tamare Hind. Therefore, the botanical name became Tamarindus. Since it is from India, it is Tamarindus indica. As a child, I think I mentioned this last time also, I have seen all stages of growth, development, and maturity of the tree and the fruit in my childhood. We had almost 12 trees of tamarind growing in our compound. And every year, tons of fruits would be harvested from those 12 trees by a contractor who would purchase the fruits before even they were ripe and ready for harvesting. He would make an assessment and give my father a quotation. I will pay you so much, let me take on the fruits. So I have seen this happening for several years in my childhood. And this plant reminds me of my childhood very frequently. We use it imli in so many forms, in chutneys, in sauces, and so many things. Therefore, it's a very interesting plant of the family Leguminaceae or Fabaceae. Next slide, please. Yes. Plants named after morphological features or the season or the soil or other natural features. Slide, please. Yes. Ailanthus excelsa, the tree of heaven, family Cimarubiaceae. This has a very interesting history. Ai in Latin means eternal, living forever. And in the Moluccas, it means reaching heaven also. Therefore, this is a tree which lives forever and reaches heaven. Excelsa in Latin means tall. It grows so tall that it's in the clouds and you think you're shows the blue sky in the background. And the tree is growing even in Delhi. But you don't see such a blue sky in Delhi to get such a good photograph of this tree. Why? Because we have so much of atmospheric pollution, which is harming our vegetation in many ways. So if you look at names like Ailanthus excelsa, you get information about what is the significance of this name and how we correlate it with ancient knowledge and present circumstances. Next one slide is more interesting, more important than this. The next slide, Butea monosperma. Everybody is familiar with this as the flame of the forest, the dhak or the tesu or palash. I did speak about this when I spoke about vegetation of Delhi also. It is common in the Mangarbani conserved forest. It is even found on Buddha Jayanti Park Ridge and other places. I have mentioned earlier, and Gita confirmed that yes, a tree in Gargi College is surviving. We have trees in Purumal College and other colleges also. Well, monosperma is the name given because every fruit has only one seed, monosperma, one seed. The ovary has 8 to 10 ovules. Pollination takes place, but only one ovule is fully fertilized to form a seed. And nature has decided that that seed will always be the last seed in the fruit, not the first or the second or the third seed. So you have a long fruit with no seeds, but at the end, a broad portion of the fruit showing one seed. So Butea monosperma, when it is blooming, when it's flowering, is a beautiful sight. And I have enjoyed seeing this when I used to drive to Surajkund for my research work. Whole land roadside would be just flaming red. That was image I have of this. Unfortunately, you don't see that situation today. Changes have come in. But whenever it blooms, it's a beautiful sight. Next slide, please. Yes, I talk about this in detail sometimes when I talk to many people. It's called the scholar's tree because the Latin scholar means school, refers to school. And this is based on the fact that the wood of this plant was used for making blackboards. Therefore, blackboards are used in schools. Therefore, this plant is linked to the schools. But at the same time, we have another name for this plant. It's called the devil's tree or Shaitan ka ped in Hindi. This is based on a belief that the tree causes uneasiness to those sleeping under the tree at night. The scientific fact is that this tree releases large amounts of carbon dioxide at night. And if anybody is sleeping under this, gets less of oxygen and may faint or feel uncomfortable. People did not know the scientific reason behind this. Therefore, they said, इस पेड़ में शैतान है, तो इसके नीचे नहीं सोना. That's why it's the devil's tree. Therefore, we must know that a scholar can be a shaitan also. If he or she loads you with too much information. I don't want to be a shaitan. I don't want to be a scholar also. I want to be a student and learn more. Next slide, please. Delonex regia. I think I showed this earlier also. Gulmohar, or important flame in plant. The specific epithet regia means royal or splendid, and Delonex refers to the conspicuous claw, a structure in the petal. So two terms have been used in giving this botanical name. Delonex from the structure and regia from its appearance. So a combination of two factors has been used to give one single botanical name, Delonex regia. Next slide, please. Tectona grandis, the teak wood. It's an Indian plant, basically. This word Tectona is based on a Malayalam word, Teka. Teka in Malayalam means wood. In Portuguese, it was translated Tea. And Tea in Portuguese means carpenter. That means carpenters use this wood. This is one of the best woods for making furniture. It's the most prized wood for normal furniture. Grandis is the specific, that means it grows to grand height. And this is a beautiful plant. There are many, many beautiful specimens of this plant. There is a transverse section of a teak wood specimen in the Forest Research Institute, Dehradun, where the diameter of that trunk was more than 8 feet. You can imagine how broad that tree must have been. Similarly, I have seen teak wood specimens in the Kerala Forest Research Institute, where I have been as a consultant a number of times, where they have cleared an entire forest of teak because of infection in the trees. And they are treating that area and converting it into another forest with disease-free trees. Therefore, this is an important tree. We have a very interesting Burma teak also, which is slightly heavier and different. Teak grows even in Dehradun and other places in northern India, in Madhya Pradesh, in Nagpur, etc. But originally, it was from the Western Ghats, especially Kerala, and in Southeast Asia. Therefore, Tectona grandis does not link to it to India alone. It takes us to all other parts of the world because of its grand wood and its appearance. Next slide, please. Yes. Terminalia arjuna, very common tree in Delhi, even around my house. There are so many trees growing beautifully. Terminalia in Latin refers to the leaves present in the upper half of the tree, crowded in the upper branches. And if you see all these trees of this Terminalia, all of them are densely made with branches thickly covered with leaves. This particular species is Arjuna in honor of the Arjun, the famous Pandava member of the five Pandavas. Arjun is named in his honor, and it is a beautiful plant of the family Combretaceae, commonly growing everywhere in Delhi. So you can find it easily and know its correct name. Next one, please. Yes, I talked about Ficus bengalensis. This is a variant of Ficus bengalensis. Earlier it was called Ficus bengalensis variety Krishnei, but now it is raised to the rank of a species called Ficus krishnei, the Krishna fig. There is a legend that Lord Krishna in the slide, and it is called Makhan Katori plant. This is a development because of some congenital fusion during development. And it is not normal because on the same tree, you get leaves without the cups also. Therefore, it is just a what you call a phenotype typic variant, not a genetic variant. But since these cup-shaped leaves are distinct and different from the original Ficus bengalensis, botanists have suggested it to be recognized as a different species. Therefore, when you look at this, it's common in Lodi Garden. So many trees are growing. Many students, which I accompanied during my excursions, were enamored by this, and they collected. I grew several plants of this in the college garden, but unfortunately, they have not survived due to unfortunate reasons. I don't want to comment on them. Next one, please. Yes. Bombax ceiba, the silk cotton tree, also called the Malabar cotton tree or Bombax malabarica. The name Bombax comes from Greek, which means silk. The fruits of the seed, which are capsules, are stuffed with silky hairs on the surface of the seed. And that gives the name Bombax ceiba to this plant. They will be blooming now in March and April in Delhi, and they'll be falling off, and only the mature fruits will shed out the seeds and they'll fly out, and the silk can be collected and used. Therefore, we have a beautiful tree growing everywhere in Delhi, which is originally supposed to be from Malabar, South India, and common for its silk-like cotton from the pods, comparable to cotton from Gossypium, which is normal cotton, and they both belong to the same family. That's why I remember as a child, my mother and grandmother would make special pillows with silk cotton, not with normal cotton, to give soft comfort to those who are having headaches, etc. So we can use silk cotton pillows and enjoy comfort in our sleep. Next one, please. Yes. Gamelina arborea, the white teak or the Kashmir teak, family Lamiaceae. Gamelina is in honor of a German botanist, John Georg Gamelin, and the specific epithet arborea means tree-like because of its broad coverage as a canopy. So two factors have been used in giving this name: honor of a botanist and the spread of the plant as a broad-based canopy tree, Gamelina arborea. Next one, please. From a tall tree to a very dwarf plant, common on the Delhi Ridge. I have collected this many times, found in Delhi, many parts of Delhi. Elateria acaulis. Acaulis means absence of stem, but the stem is present in a condensed form and it is surrounded by a whirl of leaves. When the plant has to flower, the stem grows out in the form of a spike. You can see the tall spikes growing out with flowers, and they can mature, form fruits, and new seeds are formed. They fall on the ground, they germinate into new plants. So a plant can have very small condensed stem as shown in this Elateria acaulis. Next one is even better. The next slide is even better probably. Next slide. Yes. The common annual bluegrass or meadowgrass, Poa annua. The generic name Poa in Latin refers to grasses growing in pastures. It's a pasturage grass, common in all pastures. And annua means it's annual. It grows for 3 to 6 months. The corm or the underground rhizomes remain and new shoots emerge regularly. So this is beautiful examination of an annual plant. Next one, please. Beta vulgaris. Yes, we all love eating beets. I have seen white beets, deep yellow beets, pink beets, dark red beets, even purple beets all over in different parts of the world. And they all belong to the same species. It's just a matter of different pigments being stored during growth. It's a beetroot, genus is Beta. Vulgaris means it's common. And we see this beetroot common in many parts of the world. Canada chale jao, America chale jao, Britain chale jao, you'll see this beetroot everywhere. So it's a very common plant. Vulgaris is common. And it's a beet plant because you can eat that beet. You can make sugar from the sugar beet. You can extract the pigments from the sugar beet and use them for many purposes. Next one, please. Ceropegia Noorjahanai. Yes, I'll use both names to explain this. Ceros in Greek means wax, and page means fountain, referring to the milky exudate from the plant. When you break the plant, the milky exudate flows out, waxy fluid flows out, because Apocynaceae aspergillosis have milky latex in them. Yes, this is a rare species found in Satara in Maharashtra, collected by a botanist who named it in honor of his wife, Noor Jahan. Noor Jahan means light of the world. Noor Jahanai is the Latin formulation of the name Noor Jahan. Now, for this botanist, his wife Noor Jahan was the light of his family world. It seems she encouraged him to go about looking at nature and collect plants. And he honored her with this name. Therefore, you can honor your girlfriend, your wife, or your spouse by identifying a new plant species and naming in his or her honor. Yes, next slide, please. A very common plant at one time, gradually disappearing in many parts of the country. I got reports of this disappearing in many campuses in Punjab from my colleagues and friends. And now even in Delhi, it's becoming difficult to collect this plant. Tribulus terrestris. Again, both parts of the name can be explained easily. The generic name Tribulus is made of two words. Trias means three, and bullatus means bumpy surface, referring to the rough surface of the fruits. The fruits are trigonous, three parts, and they have a very rough surface. Okay, and the specific epithet terrestris means it grows on the ground. It's terrestrial, it grows on the ground. It spreads on the ground, doesn't grow tall. Therefore, the name is explaining two aspects: the origin of the generic name and the factor of its growth in the specific epithet. Next slide, please. Yes. I could not get a better slide of this from my collection, but I want to show that this is a very interesting plant, where here you are not seeing the tip of the leaf, but you're seeing the beautiful inflorescence. Anagaisis acuminata is common on the ridge. Okay. Next slide will show you the leaf. Next slide will show you the leaf. Yes. The leaf is pointed at the apex. It's different from a normal acute apex. That's why it's named as acuminata. Okay. So we know that it has sharp pointed leaves tapering at the apex. So specific epithet is explaining the character of the leaf. Next slide, please. Yes. From Assam, Titabak, Phlogocanthus thriciformis. Beautiful plant. Phlogocanthus, the generic name Phlogocanthus, is made up of two words. Phlogos means red or flame, and acanthus means thorn. The spike grows like a thorn. Okay. Therefore, it is beautiful. And thriciformis is the kind of inflorescence. It's a thrice, not a normal spike. So you get the meaning of the names by analyzing the terminology. And that is the beauty of nomenclature. The next slide, please. Yes. The nightmare of botany honor students at the time of practical examinations many years ago. Merua arneria, family Caparaceae. This flowers only in the second week of March onwards, when the practical exams are held. For the rest of the year, after summer, it never flowers. The students have already studied family Caparaceae during the year, but had never seen this flower, and they're given this in the examination. Interestingly, if they systematically analyze the flower, they identify the family correctly. The name Merua arneria is used for this plant. Why? Because arneria means growing in sandy soils. The plant grows in sandy soils. It is a bushy plant, grows throughout the year, but flowers only mid-March onwards in Delhi, Ridge, etc. So students of botany can get surprises and identify plant families correctly if they work systematically. Next slide, please. Yes. Nyctanthus arbotristis, Harshingar plant, also called the sad tree. Nyctanthus, night flower. And arbotristis in Latin means sad tree. Why? Because the flowers fall off in the morning. They open at night, they fall off in the morning. Therefore, the tree feels very sad. It is Harshingar because the beautifully colored tube, which you can see, admits the pale white petals, thick, glossy white petals. So they fall off the moment the sun rises. And I have seen people picking up these flowers in their morning walk and using them for puja in their homes. So nothing goes waste. You can learn a lot from this. A few more slides before I talk something more serious. Next slide, please. Yes. Oryza sativa. Everybody knows this is the rice plant, family Poaceae. Oryza, the generic name Oryza comes from the Arabic word eruz, E-R-U-Z, which is for grain. And the specific epithet sativa means it is cultivated because there are wild rices also. This is the most commonly cultivated species. There is another species, Oryza glaberrima, growing in Africa, but not as well known as Oryza sativa in the world. This provides grain to a very large proportion of the population in the whole of Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. Our common wheat plant, the bread wheat plant, Triticum aestivum. The Latin name for aestivum is wheat. And sorry, the Latin name for wheat is Triticum. And it is the classical name for this plant. Aestivum in Latin means summer. In most of Europe, North America, Canada, etc., winter is very severe with snow covering the soil. For example, right now, today morning, my son informed me that there is 4 feet of snow in his compound in Washington, in Wisconsin. So if there is 4 feet of snow on the soil, nothing can grow. Therefore, wheat can't grow in such cold weather in those places. It's always grown as a summer crop in those cold places. Unlike India, where we grow it as a winter crop. Therefore, it is basically a summer plant in its original home. And it spread to different parts of the world from Middle East, where it was wild, but they have maintained that. So knowing the name has helped us to trace its origin and understand how the common wheat, which is hexaploid, originated. So you will learn about this from your economic botany classes as well as from your genetic classes, and you can know more about it. Next slide, please. I think this should be the best part, sweet part of the slideshow. We have this common plant, sugarcane plant, Sakharum officinarum. The name Sakharum is from Sanskrit shakkar, turned to Latin saccharon and became Sakharum for botanical purposes. This is shakkara is used in many languages for this plant. I will just add a little bit of history. When Alexander visited India, he was surprised to see that the locals were chewing a grass which was very sweet. Sugar was not known in the Western world before Alexander came to India. They had only dates as the source of their sweetness. No sugar was available to them for their sweetness. And now this is a hybrid which has been produced by many experiments in breeding to give us a sturdy plant, thick stem, and sufficient juice to extract the sugar. So sugar cane is an Indian plant spread to different parts of the world. Today, maybe other countries produce more sugar than India, but India also has a large amount of sugar. Don't worry, we have sufficient sugar. Yes, please, I think I'll stop this presentation of the slides and go to more concrete things of nomenclature and give some hardcore taxonomy for the students especially. You can go to the next slide, please. Yes. Botanic
Sir is muted.
There are two important objectives of this code. One, there should be no ambiguity. Botanical names must be unambiguous so that there is no confusion in anybody using that name. Second, it must have universal application. The name, which is correct, must be used by all botanists all over the world. If to achieve these two objectives, the code lays down 6 principles, which are the guiding ideas for formation of the name and recognition of botanical nomenclature. Most important point is botanical nomenclature is independent of zoological nomenclature. They have different codes. Efforts have been made to make a common code called the biocode, but we have not succeeded in solving that issue. So we have codes. We also have a third code for nomenclature bacteria, which is available, International Code of Bacterial Nomenclature. So we must know that botanical nomenclature is governed by the ICN and not by any other code. Secondly, the application of names of taxonomic groups is determined by means of nomenclature types. This means that every name has to be based on one particular type. I'll explain this a little later. Third principle is the nomenclature of taxonomic groups is based on priority of principle of priority. So there is a definite procedure to recognize which is the correct name, and this is based on the date of publication, which I'll talk about a little later. Fourth point is very important. Every taxonomic group, whether it's a species, a genus, a family, an order, class, or phylum or kingdom, if you like to call, must have only one correct name, given particular circumscription, position, and rank. Therefore, the genus rank is different from the species rank. Family rank is different from the genus rank, and so on. Each group can have only one correct name. Scientific names of taxonomic groups are treated as Latin, regardless of their derivative. I have told you about plants named from Tamil, Malayalam, Sanskrit, etc. So you can take the name from any language and make a Latin name out of that. This code allows that. Sixth and most important, rules of nomenclature are retroactive. That means if a rule is changed at the Botanical Congress in future, it will become important for all names which are existing retroactive, unless there is a limitation to the application of any rule. Next slide, please. It is necessary to briefly explain the importance of the code. In many ways, I have found similarities between the Constitution of India and the International Code of Nomenclature. In both these instruments, I call them instruments, the rules are presented in the form of articles, which are sacrosanct, which have to be observed, which have to be understood, which have to be applied. Under each article, there are several rules. These have to be strictly followed. Several rules can be applied simultaneously for proper formation of names and their application in botanical nomenclature. Just like in our constitution, you can quote 2 or 3 articles and different rules to make up a case for amendment or for recognition or for any aspect of parliamentary functioning. These rules are, there are also recommendations listed with the articles and the rules. These are meant to explain the rules and help in applying the rules. They are not compulsory, but they are very helpful. The code can be amended for serving the objectives and improving nomenclature. This is possible just like we do the amendment of the Constitution. For example, our Indian Constitution, 70 years since existence, has been amended so many times by different governments in the past and even in the present. So we need not worry about amendments because they will come and they can be brought about in proper format and proper code of conduct. Finally, the nomenclature section of the International Botanical Congress has the responsibility of examining the proposals for amendments and suggesting them for approval. International Botanical Congresses are held every 6 years. In the intervening period, a standing committee on nomenclature is formed, and there are 15 members from different parts of the world in this committee. They receive recommendations for amendments from botanists all over the world. Each of the 15 members examines each and every recommendation, and they analyze the pros and cons of the suggestions, and then they discuss with each other what are the implications of this suggestion or this recommendation for amendment. Therefore, these suggestions are put to vote. There are many instances where all 15 agree with the suggestion and accept it. On the other opposite extreme, all 15 may not agree with the proposal and reject it. So this goes on until there is unanimity in understanding all aspects of what the individual recommends for amendment. And only then these proposals are put up to the International Botanical Congress, where the nomenclature section, again, which is a general body of all botanists specializing in nomenclature, discussing threadbare all the proposals once again, and then voting. And again, as in amending a constitution of India, 2/3 majority has to be present, approve of it before it's accepted. So when you build up a code or a constitution, you must have a very broad framework for analyzing the pros and cons of what you're putting down. And fortunately, the International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, or the International Code of Nomenclature, has gone through this rigorous treatment for the last more than 70 years. During my observation, from the 1950s to the present, it has been gone through rigorous evaluation. Next slide, please. There are 4 very important aspects when we talk about nomenclature, which every student of botany should know. One is the proper publication of names. Second is the typification of the names. Number 3 is the principle of priority. And number 4 is author citation. I shall briefly elaborate on all these one by one. Next slide, please. Yes. There are 2 aspects of publication of names. Number 1, names must be effectively published. That is, the name has to be an effective publication. This means that the botanical name must be published in a scientific journal or in a botanical monograph. Today, they're allowing online publication also, because scientific journals and monographs are available online. Therefore, it is allowed to be in this form. But originally, it had to be published in printed form. That is the major change we now have in online publication. In real terms, it basically still requires that the name must be published in printed form in a scientific journal or in a botanical monograph. Why? If a name is published in a newspaper as a new name for a plant, or in a journal or magazine of common use, or in a catalog of a nursery selling plants, it is not valid, because there is no scientific basis of scientists reading that published information. Therefore, it has to be in a scientific journal available to scientists in different parts of the world. Secondly, the valid publication is even more important. A name becomes effective when it's published in a scientific journal, but it will become valid only when, at the time of publishing the name, it is accompanied by a description in Latin of the plant or the group being named. This means that if you're describing a new species as a new plant to science, to botany, then the description of that species must be written in Latin. You have a concession. You write the whole description in English and then translate the main points into Latin, giving a Latin diagnosis for identification. Then when you do this, your name becomes validly published. So these two aspects of publication of names are very significant. Number one, the name must be published in a scientific journal, and it must be accompanied by a Latin description or Latin diagnosis, or alternatively, a reference to an earlier published Latin description. So Latin is the language of the code. Why? Because it is a universal language. It is not the language of any state, and it is not supposed to be non-living language, because in normal parlance, you don't talk in Latin. You talk in Latin only in special situations. For example, if you go to a church, in most parts of the Europe, Latin is the language of organizing the mass. But if you come to India, you go to a church in Karnataka, it's in Kannada. If you go into Kerala, it's in Malayalam. If you go to Tamil Nadu, it is in Tamil. Maybe in Maharashtra, it is in Marathi. So Latin is a language which is universal, like something which is not ambiguous. Latin grammar is very precise. It is very meaningful, and it has got a grammar which is very, very technical. Therefore, you can use it. The same applies to Sanskrit, but unfortunately, most of the medieval scientific publications were in Latin in most parts of the world, especially Europe. And we are following that trend of using that. There are beautiful publications in Sanskrit in our own country. All the Vedas are in Sanskrit. They have tons and tons and tons of knowledge which we have not yet analyzed. But outside India, very few people know Sanskrit. There are beautiful, well-known Sanskrit scholars in Germany, in America, and other places, but they are a minuscule minority. Therefore, we have not promoted our language Sanskrit. We have to depend on an internationally recognized language, Latin, in our botanical nomenclature. Next, please. Next. Just as publication allows a name to enter nomenclature, names can be applied by means of the process called typification, which means that a name after it is published, its application is determined by what are called nomenclature types. Therefore, typification is a process of designating a nomenclature type. This means that every name has to be linked to a type. The type I'll explain a little later. It is an element on which the name of the species or the name of the genus or the name of the family is based. And that element varies. I'll explain that a little later. Therefore, as I just said just a short while ago, just as valid publication allows a name to enter botanical nomenclature, typification is a method of allotting names to taxonomic groups or categories or taxa. The ICN recognizes the type only as a concept. It is common to all applications of a given name. It's the basis by which a name is permanently linked to its type. This helps in determining the correct name even when the classification changes. Therefore, only names have types. And this is a very important lesson for students to know that it is the name which has the type, not the plant. Next slide, please. Yes. Definition of nomenclature type. This is important. The type is an element. The element can be an actual specimen. If you're describing a species, you're looking at a plant specimen, describing it, and publishing that information along with the new name. That becomes original publication. Therefore, that specimen becomes the element on which the name was based. Right? Therefore, the type is a concept. Why? Because every category of names has a different type. The name of the family has a name of a genus as one type. You all know the name of the family Poaceae. Yes? The type of that name is Poa. the genus Poa. Therefore, the family gets its name Poaceae from the name of the genus Poa. And the name of the genus Poa becomes a type of the name of the family Poaceae. The same is true of Magnolia, Magnoliaceae, Brassica, Brassicaceae, Solanum, Solanaceae, Anacardium, Anacardiaceae, Asteraceae, Aster, and so on and so forth. Okay. Secondly, the name of the genus has the name of one species as its type. Poa annua is the name of one species of the genus Poa. And this happens to be the first named species of the genus Poa. Therefore, the generic name Poa became known when this name Poa annua was published. Therefore, the generic name Poa is based on the type of the generic name, on the type of the binomial Poa annua. Therefore, the name of the species serves as a type for the name of the genus. It's a little difficult in the beginning to understand this, but if you look at it coolly, if you look at it carefully, when you name the species, you'll understand this better. I explained the name of Asroa triandra earlier when I talked about A.S. Rao. Yes, it was a totally new plant, not known to science at all. Even the generic name did not exist. Yes, therefore, Asroa triandra was published together as one new species, and that publication gave us the name of a new genus also, Asroa. So the specific name becomes the type of generic name. Okay, name of the species becomes the type of the name of the genus into which that species is classified. Poa annua, Solanum nigrum, or Blumia lanceolata, etc., etc. Finally, the name of the species has an actual plant specimen as its type. This is the specimen used by the taxonomist to describe the plant, and therefore it becomes the type of that name. The actual specimen used for describing the new species becomes the type of that new name for the species, for the genus, for the family, etc., etc. Yes, next slide, please. Now, there are many different specimens available to botanists for study when they are trying to identify a new species. And each kind of specimen has a significance. Therefore, when we talk about typification, we can recognize many kinds of types. The most significant is called the holotype. It is defined as the original specimen named by the author while describing a new species as the type of the new name. Now, if there is only one specimen which is being used to describe the new species, that single specimen is listed, it is automatically the holotype. But if an author has collected, say, 4 specimens of the same plant at the same time to describe a new species, then the author who is describing the species must specify which of these 4 specimens is the real type, or it to be called the holotype. It has to be designated. You have to give a definition. You have to mention which specimen is the real type. That is called the holotype. Once that is decided, the remaining 3 specimens are merely duplicates of the holotype. Therefore, they are called isotypes. Now, this brings me to a very interesting aspect. Holotype and isotypes are always collected together from the same location, maybe from the same plant or from the same population. They are collected on the same day by the same author, right? So a holotype is either a single specimen or a specimen designated by the author of a name as the type, because he or she found that specimen to be best preserved in his herbarium, or depicting the most significant characteristic features which he has described. Therefore, he has picked up that it's his or her choice. Nobody can challenge that, right? All other specimens collected along with this specimen from the same plant, if it's a large tree or a bush, or from the same collection for small herbaceous plants like grasses, from the same population, then all other specimens are supposed to be identical or duplicates of the holotype. They are called isotypes. Therefore, the isotype is a specimen collected from the same plant or the same location or from the same population by an author or a collector at the same time and collect identified together. One of the specimens is referred as the holotype, the others are called isotypes, right? So, but there's a further aspect of this. There are specimens which don't belong to the same collection. I have seen it myself. I have collected some plants, sometimes 3 or 4 specimens. Maybe 2 or 3 years later, 4 or 5 more plants of the same species from another location, or maybe from the same location. And I've used a larger number of specimens when I'm identifying a new species. I have an example of Father Matthew from Trichy, St. Joseph's College, Trichy, who spent 32 years examining not a few specimens, but hundreds of specimens before deciding whether the plant he was looking at was a new species or not. And he had hundreds of specimens to look, identify, and pick up any one of them as holotype. All specimens collected with that collection became isotypes, but there are so many more specimens. He listed all of them, they became known as paratypes. That is, material other than the holotype or isotypes listed or mentioned in the original publication of a name by a botanist are called paratypes. They belong to different collections, different locations, and different times. So, but they have helped the botanist to identify a new species, and they have been mentioned in the original publication of the name. Therefore, they are called paratypes. Agreed? Okay. If you understood this, then the remaining 3 are easier. Now, going back to holotype and isotypes, if an author has used 2 or more specimens for identifying a new species, but very important, but did not specify which of the specimens examined is the real type or the holotype, just mention all the specimens as type, then there can be confusion. To avoid that confusion, the code says call all these as identical to each other. They are syn types. Therefore, if there are lapse on the part of a taxonomist in not designating, not specifying one particular specimen as a holotype, but listing 2 or more specimens as type, then all of them will be called syn types. Specimens other than this collection, which has not been designated, if they are mentioned with other taxonomist names or other botanist names or other location names, they'll remain as paratypes. That's an important point. Now, if you have syn types, then the code allows you to pick up one of them to serve the purpose of a holotype. And you can, when you do that, you can call that a lectotype. Lectotypes can come from different specimens. If the holotype is lost or destroyed in a fire or a flood, and an isotype is available, then the isotype can serve as holotype, but it will not be called holotype, it will be called isolectotype. If holotype and isotypes are all lost and destroyed, not available, but a paratype is available, then the taxonomist can pick up a paratype and use it in place of holotype. It will be called a paralectotype. So lectotypes can come from original material listed in the original publication, which could be from syntypes, isotypes, or paratypes, not from the holotype, because holotype will remain, and if it's lost, then the others will serve its purpose. So the lectotype is method of allowing taxonomists to designate a type from available material. Now, if no original material is available at all, no holotype, no isotype, no paratypes, no syntypes, nothing can be designated lectotypes, then the taxonomist can pick up any new specimen and give it the rank of a type, but it will be called a new type. Why? Because it will be many years later, maybe 100 years later, maybe 200 years later. So it's a new type for that name, but the name is existing, right? And finally, topotype has no real significance in explaining nomenclature, but it is asked in examination questions, so I put it there. Any material collected from the original location where the holotype or the original syntypes or paratypes were collected can be mentioned that this is a topotype from the same topographical region of the type material. It is not, I repeat, it is not equivalent to the holotype, but it can help in locating where the holotype was collected. Therefore, types are important because I explain a little later now. Next slide, please. When we look at botanical names, we find that there's a name of a botanist followed by the botanical name. Sometimes single person, sometimes more than one person. This refers to the individual or individuals who publish the name according to the rules of nomenclature. It helps in locating the publication for determining the details of the name. Next slide, please. Yes, there are different kinds of author citations. We have the most common simple citations where the name of the plant is followed by the name or names of the authors. For example, Oryzes sativa Linn means that Linnaeus named this plant. Portulaca grandiflora Hook F means that it was named by Hooker Filius, that is Joseph Dalton Hooker. Putranjiva Roxburghi means it was named by Wallich, Nathaniel Wallich, in honor of Roxburgh. Panicum ascendens is a grass. H, D, and K are three botanists, Humboldt, Bonpland, and Kunz. Three authors together jointly published this name. Then the second kind of author citations are the use of prepositions linking two names, preposition in and preposition ex. First, preposition in. I've taken up examples from Delhi Flora only. Cucurbita maxima Tuch in Lamarck. That means the first author, Tuch, Toussaint, published the name in a publication which is more well known by the name of the second author, that's Lamarck. So if you want to identify this name, you have to look into a publication of Lamarck to find this name. Lens culinaris, Masoor ki dal, Masoor. Medic in Waters. Medic is the author of this name, but he published it in a volume by Waters, which is well known, and not Medic, which is well known. Similarly, Cleome brachycarpa, Pahal X DC. Now, here it's a difference. Cleome brachycarpa was originally named by Bahal, but not properly published. And it was De Candolle who properly published it, giving recognition to the name given by Bahal. Therefore, in this case, the name after the preposition X is important for publishing the name according to the rules. Similarly, Momordica dioica Roxburgh X Wildenau. Roxburgh gave this name, but not published it validly. Therefore, Wildenau published it properly, and the citation includes Wildenau's name, Momordica X Roxburgh X Wildenau. Next slide, please. Yes. We also come across use of parentheses in author citations. Again, names are mostly from Flora of Delhi, except Mecanopsis. Lumia obliqua Lynn Bruce. Now, Eclipta prostrata, Lynn. See, the same author has published the name twice. Abitilon indicum, Lynn Sweet. Bacanopsis spinosa, Hook F. Taylor. These are called double citations. They indicate a name change either due to taxonomic reasons, that is change in classification, or due to nomenclature reasons, which means improper use in the past. So when you see this kind of citation, you must always remember that they are indicative of what has happened in the nomenclature of this particular species or this particular entity, this particular taxon. Next, please. There are some other aspects of nomenclature which are interesting, but sometimes asked in examination, so I thought I'll add these. Nomina conservanda. Conservation of names is allowed by the code sometimes by applying some requirements under the proposals called nomina conservanda. Suppose a name has become very well known throughout the world, but it is not according to the rules. If we change the name of that particular taxon, then there will be volumes of publications required to change the name in all the records. That can cause more confusion. Therefore, the rules permit, under certain circumstances, that to conserve the name even if it's violating the rules. That is an exception to the rules. So very few such instances are allowed in case of names of species, but this is very common in the names of genera, and it is important that generic names are not conserved. They will have to, most of generic names, not very few generic names are allowed to be conserved. Then synonyms are also another interesting point. We come across instances where more than one name has been published for the same plant. Now, just for a minute, we know that Lord Shiva has thousands of names. We know Lord Krishna has hundreds of names. In the same way, humans also have so many names. MS Dhoni as Mahi and so many other names. Yes, right. But all of them are not official. Only one of them is the official name. Therefore, the correct name is applied according to the circumstances in which it is used. In some parts very important. If you go to Mathura, it is a different name. If you go to Dwarka, it's a different name. So they're all synonyms. They mean the same thing. Therefore, botanical nomenclature also has synonyms, because most of these names have been published following the rules. They are therefore treated as synonyms. But the rules specify principle of priority, and only one of these can be correct. Therefore, when you recognize a correct name, the others are always referred to as synonyms. Next slide, please. Yes, my entire talk has been based on my own textbook, chapter 4. There are about 12 pages on nomenclature in that textbook, and 3 chapters from Rajni Gupta's book, Plant Taxonomy, Past, Present, Future, where I have drawn a lot of information, and I thank everyone for their patience in listening to my boring talk. I think I should conclude now. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for this lecture. It was really nice and informative. And I think you explained all the slides with great patience. Thank you so much again, sir. Now I invite Rajni ma'am to start question and answer session. Rajni ma'am.